when I was around 13 years old. My older sister had just gotten her driver's license, and we used to wait for my dad to fall asleep, and we'd basically steal the car and go out joyriding at night. Well, this one night, we went out. On the way back, my sister's like, let's just go the back roads. I feel like going by my friend's house. So we're going the back roads, and on the right-hand side, in somebody's front yard, we see this giant black disc. This thing is about half the size of a house in height, about the width of a house. My sister pulls over. We're just looking at each other incredulously, and I decided to get out of the car. I start making a beeline towards this object, and I get about 25, 30 yards from it, and this thing just hops up off the ground in a split second. It was on the ground, and then a second later, it's like 2 feet off the ground. And it starts to slowly ascend in front of me. It's completely quiet, gets to the top of the tree line, and then in a split second, it just shoots off into the clouds.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Area 52 podcast. My name is Chris Ramsey, and today we're going to be taking a very, very deep dive into the Special Operations Manual of a group known as the MJ-12. And if you're wondering what the MJ-12 is, fret not. The gentlemen behind me here on these little Polaroids are actually part of a top secret group that was put together to control, contain, and explore the UFO, extraterrestrial biological entity presence that has been communicating and interacting with our planet since the late 1940s. I highly suggest you go check out the video that I've already done, kind of deep diving into each individual on this list and the purpose of the MJ-12 themselves and what their role is in all of this. The manual allegedly came out in 1954, but was not leaked until 1994 to a gentleman by the name of Don Berliner. There were Tri-X negatives mailed to Mr. Don Berliner, postmarked on March 7th, 1994. Now, the document we're going to be reading is a replica of the one that was photographed by an unknown person that was submitted on, this reel of photos. The MJ-12 debate goes pretty deep among UFO researchers, and people flip-flop back and forth. I've been looking forward to reading through this document, and I can't wait to do it with you all today. Before we do that, a few little things I must say. First of all, here's a word from our sponsors. At Area 52, we run things a little differently. We investigate the unknown and chase down leads most won't touch. And when it comes to launching our own products, like our brand new MJ-12 collection, we don't do it alone. We use Shopify, our official platform for all things Area 52. Think of it as a command center for any operation, selling, shipping, marketing, even launching collections inspired by government secrets. It's fast and powerful and works across every channel: YouTube, Instagram, Google, you name it. But the real game changer? Shopify Sidekick. It's like having an embedded agent inside your business. You can talk to it, ask it to build pages, give it feedback. It'll even analyze your sales and tell you what's working. I used it while prepping the MJ-12 drop, and it felt like I had a classified assistant with clearance to everything. If you're ready to go from idea to operation, start your mission now at shopify.com/area52 or scan the QR code on the screen. That's shopify.com/area52. Your mission starts here. All right, folks, we paid the bills. If you don't mind, leave a like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave us a favorable review on Spotify or iTunes or wherever it is you listen to these podcasts. It would be greatly appreciated, and it goes a really long way. So, there is a researcher by the name of Ryan Woods who spent most of his career really looking into this and proving or trying to disprove the authenticity of the MJ-12 documents. Him, along with Stanton Friedman and many others, had their go at these specific documents. Ryan Woods, I think, went the deepest. And he has his report available on specialoperationsmanual.com, which I'll leave the link to below, where he details his forensic analysis on some of the things that might help prove the authenticity of these documents, which would be absolutely earth-shattering. Before we get into reading, I'm just going to go over a few of the bullet points that Ryan Woods has found through his research proving the authenticity of these documents. So in short, forensic analysis of the language, font, and original photographic film prove that the document was produced in or around 1954. And that's according to Woods' research and expert witnesses he's contacted at the National Archive. The manual, however, did not become public until 1994. We know this where it was leaked to Mr. Berliner. Now, in the manual, they specifically talk about Area 51, S4, Site 4. Now, Bob Lazar only came public in 1989, so that would have been a full 5 years prior to this document coming out, which does raise a little bit of suspicion, obviously. But put that aside for a second, here are some things that corroborate the 1954 production of this document. So, the manual was sent anonymously to Don Berliner in 1994, but the documents were sent as images on a film, and that film was authenticated to 1954 based on its type of underdeveloped 35mm Tri-X. Number 2, the detailed packaging procedures for the recovered EBEs and craft specifically mention craft tape, not duct tape, which is accurate to 1954 shipping methods. Okay. The packaging procedures spell out screwdriver as 2 words, which was customary in 1954, but not today. Okay. Similarly, first aid was capitalized in 1954, but the U.S. custom changed to lowercase first aid in the late 1950s. Similarly, again, the control sentence on one of the pages specifies N.Mex for New Mexico, when the modern abbreviation would be NM. Number 3, the only typo in the document is desiccant, spelt with 2 C's, not 2 S's, suggesting the document underwent thorough manual editing, but not computer-based editing, since a spell checker would have caught the mistake automatically. Next up, the letter Z. The letter Z is raised from the other text, indicating the printed document came from a hot lead printing press appropriate to 1954, and not a more modern monotype press, which does not have the same problem with a raised Z. The Z button was not used frequently as the other letters, and unfrequently used letters like the Z got crud on the brass slugs in the press, leading to the letter being raised above the others. Very interesting. So the raised Z matches other Army manuals at the time. Okay. If you want to read more detailed, obviously more granular research that Mr. Ryan Woods has put together, head over to that website if you're still feeling a little bit skeptical. But for now, I invite you to put that skepticism aside, suspend your disbelief, and come with me as we dive deep into 1954 and take a look at the Special Operations Manual for Extraterrestrial Entities and Technology Recovery and Disposal of the Majestic 12. Cover letter's got all types of warning. Again, this is a transcription of the original here. It says this is a top secret magic eyes only document containing compartmentalized information essential to the national security of the United States. Eyes only accessed to the material herein is strictly limited to personnel possessing Magic 12 clearance level. Examination or use by an unauthorized personnel is strictly forbidden and punishable by federal law. Okay. Which would be interesting, wouldn't it? It's interesting that they put that little thing in there. If you read this and you're not authorized, it's punishable by law. But then you would have to admit that the program exists. So it is kind of silly that they write that. First and foremost, I will say that is a silly thing. Please arrest someone for reading this and charge them with reading this specific document. That would be great. That would be a great way to get disclosure. And by the way, if you want to watch another deep dive into the MJ-12 stuff, I highly suggest you go subscribe to my friend UAPGERB. He goes deeper than anybody else into the military's involvement with extraterrestrials. So the first page here talks about the removal and or replacement of pages attached to the document requires written authorization from the Magic 12 operations officer and will be recorded by the document's records officer for each instance. Okay. Gives you a few dates here. Nothing we're going to deep dive into right now. Another warning page. Here we have a bit of an index of what's to come in this document. So section 1, the project purpose and goals. 1, the scope. This manual has been prepared especially for Majestic 12 units. Its purpose is to present all aspects of MJ-12 so authorized personnel will have a better understanding of the goals of the group, be able to more expertly deal with unidentified flying objects, extraterrestrial technology, and entities, and increase the efficiency of future operations. Number 2, General. MJ-12 takes the subject of UFOBs. Now, UFOB was the proper acronym that people would use to describe UFOs back then, so if you're ever searching the CIA archive, and if you type in UFOs, you probably won't get much, but UFOB, you'll get quite a bit of results popping up. And if you're wondering, what does the B stand for? It's simply object, so they use the O and the B, so like a UFOB, the O and the B would stand for object. MJ-12 takes the subject of the UFOBs, extraterrestrial technology, and extraterrestrial biological entities very seriously and considers the entire subject to be a matter of the very highest national security. For that reason, everything relating to the subject has been assigned the very highest security classification. 3 main points will be covered in this section. A, the general aspects of MJ-12 to clear up any misconceptions that anyone may have. B, the importance of the operations. And C, the need for absolute secrecy in all phases of the operations. 3, security classifications. All information relating to MJ-12 has been classified Magic Eyes only and carries a security level 2 points above that of top secret. The reason for this has to do with the consequences that may arise, not only from the impact upon the public should the existence of such matters become general knowledge, but also the danger of having such advanced technology as has been recovered by the Air Force fall into the hands of unfriendly foreign powers. No information is released to the public press, and the official government position is that no such special group as MJ-12 exists. Also interesting to note that the badge that Bob Lazar had while working at S4 had the letters MAJ on the badge. This is not an official replica of the badge, but in the new Project Gravator movie that's coming out, S4, the Bob Lazar story, they do replicate that badge, so you can see what that looked like according to Bob's memory. Number 4, history of the group. Operation Majestic 12 was established by Special Classified Presidential Order on 24th of September 1947 at the recommendation of Secretary of Defense James V. Forrestal and Dr. Vannevar Bush, Chairman of the Joint Research and Development Board. Operations are carried out under a top-secret research and development intelligence group directly responsible to the President of the United States. The goals of the MJ-12 group are as follows. A, recovery for scientific study of all materials and devices of foreign or extraterrestrial manufacture that may become available. Such material and devices will be recovered by any and all means deemed necessary by the group. That's terrifying right off the bat, just like any means necessary. B, the recovery for scientific study of all entities and remains of entities not of terrestrial origin, which may become available through independent action by those entities or by misfortune or military action. C, the establishment and administration of top secret teams to accomplish the above operations. So far, recovering absolutely everything that has to do with aliens by any means necessary. Pretty much your standard clause for a top secret, group that moves in the shadows and works on black budget only. D, the establishment and administration of special secure facilities located at locations within the continental borders of the United States for the receiving, processing, analysis, and scientific study of any and all materials and entities classified as being extraterrestrial origin by the group of the special teams. Now, we do know of some of these bases located around the United States, namely S4 or Site 4 where Bob Lazar worked, but we also hear about Dulce in New Mexico, about the famous, Phil Schneider sort of underground firefight that happened with the EBEs, and possibly many other places in the United States that have underground military facilities harboring, and deconstructing, reverse engineering, and working on a lot of these projects. E, establishment and administration of covert operations to be carried out in concert with Central Intelligence to effect the recovery for the United States of extraterrestrial technology and entities which may come down inside the territory of or fall into the possession of foreign powers. And F, the establishment and maintenance of absolute top secrecy concerning all the above operations. Number 5, the current situation. It is considered, as far as the current situation is concerned, that there are few indications that these objects and their builders pose a direct threat to the security of the United States, despite the uncertainty as to their ultimate motives in coming here. Certainly, the technology possessed by these beings far surpasses anything known to modern science, yet their presence here seems to be benign, and they seem to be avoiding contact with our species, at least for the present. Several dead entities have been recovered along with a substantial amount of wreckage and devices from the downed craft, all of which are now under study at various locations. No attempt has been made by the extraterrestrial entities either to contact authorities or to recover their dead counterparts or downed craft, even though one of the crashes was the result of a direct military action. The greatest threat at this time arises from the acquisition and study of such advanced technology by foreign powers unfriendly to the United States. It is for this reason that the recovery and study of this type of material by the United States has been given such a high priority. Now, I completely understand that. That is something I think we can all get behind in 1954. This is Cold War era, post-World War II. Tensions were still incredibly high as we had just developed the first nuke and deployed it. And now we're all kind of sitting back and wondering, do the Russians have this? Are they going to fight back and retaliate? So this type of technology in the wrong hands could have been absolutely devastating, could still be devastating, but especially back then. It's so crazy to just let your mind sit in 1954 with, this type of material if you were read into it. It is one thing to be told today, or shown even, that UFOs exist and that aliens are real, right? But we have so much preliminary cognitive padding when it comes to the UFO subject through science fiction, through even newspapers, TV shows, podcasts like the one you're listening to right now, that the amount of shock would have to be dampened. Like the shock of something like this back then would have been insurmountable and unfathomable for anybody. 1948 was when the helicopter was made public, was flown publicly. So in 1947, the helicopter was actually advanced military technology. So you're going from 1948 seeing a helicopter for the first time to potentially being face to face with beings from a non-earthly origin and their technology. I mean, it must shatter your paradigm so much. Chapter 2, Introduction. 6, the scope. 6A, this operation manual is published for the information and guidance of all concerned. It contains information on determination, documentation, collection, and disposition of debris, devices, crafts, and occupants of such craft as defined as extraterrestrial technology or extraterrestrial biological entities, EBEs, in Section 2 of this chapter. B. Appendix 1-1A contains a list of current references, including technical manuals and other available publications applicable to these operations. And C. Appendix 2 contains a list of personnel who comprise the MJ-12 group. 7. Forms and records. So forms used for reporting an operation are listed in Appendix 1. Section 2 of Chapter 2. The definition and data. 8. General. Extraterrestrial technology is defined as followed. A. Aircraft identified as not manufactured in the United States or any terrestrial foreign powers, including experimental military or civilian craft. Aircraft in this category are generally known as unidentified flying objects or UFOBs. Such aircraft may appear as one of several shapes and configurations and exhibit extraordinary flight characteristics. B. Objects and devices of unknown origin or function manufactured by processes or of materials not consistent with current technology or scientific knowledge. Okay. Well, that's interesting. See, they define extraterrestrial technology here as devices of unknown origin or function manufactured by processes or materials not consistent with current technology or scientific knowledge. So they're not saying that the ET technology couldn't be manufactured here on Earth. C, wreckage of any aircraft thought to be of extraterrestrial manufacture or origin. Such wreckage may be the result of accidents or military action. D, materials that exhibit unusual and or extraordinary characteristics not consistent with current technology or scientific knowledge. And then EBEs are described as A, creatures, humanoids or otherwise, whose evolutionary process responsible for their development are demonstrably different from those postulated or observed in Homo sapiens. All right, next we're going to go into the description of the craft and then the description of the aliens. 9, description of craft. Documented extraterrestrial craft, UFOBs, are classified in one of 4 categories based on general shape as follows. Now, this is interesting. We got Skywatcher and the whole team, coming up with 9 classifications for UFOs, which, by the way, not one of them is a disc. We've seen flying saucers and discs since the late 1940s, and yet one of the 9 classifications of UFOs that they have, none of them are discs. So A, elliptical or disc-shaped. This type of craft is of metallic construction and dull aluminum in color. They have the appearance of 2 pie pans or shallow dishes pressed together and may have a raised dome on the top or bottom. No seams or joints are visible on the surface, giving the impression of one-piece construction. Discs are estimated from 50 to 300 feet in diameter, and the thickness is approximately 15% of the diameter, not including the dome, which is 30% of the disc diameter and extends another 4 to 6 feet above the main body of the disc. Really interesting here that we're talking about a potential 300-foot disc. Now, 1954, what makes them think, other than having direct eyewitness, that one of these craft would be 300 feet? Yeah, does that mean they've recovered a 300-foot craft? Now, I believe a few years ago, Ross Coulthard had alluded to some type of giant UFO that was way too big for them to move, so they had to build a base around it.
So big, they built a building over it in a country outside of the United States of America.
Since then, people have been scouring the internet looking for buildings that might be under heavy military protection that stand out as potentially harboring this giant UFO. And recently, in Korea, there is this building, and I'll put it up here, that's 265 feet wide, built of stone and concrete, and surrounded by an 8-foot barbed wire fence. The signs mark it as belonging to the South Korea's Aviation Authority, and it has navigational equipment mounted on top. Other models of this antenna platform can be seen elsewhere in South Korea, and the equipment for them does not extend below the platform, meaning the equipment is only built atop the building in question. The purpose of the building itself is unexplained. Now, the building itself looks to be like 50 to 70 years old. Very, very interesting that this is a big, round building atop a mountain, which you could potentially, build into. I don't know. Is that what we're talking about here? We're talking about a 300-foot craft? That would be cool. That would be a cool connection. We carry on with the description of the UFOB. The dome may or may not include windows or ports, and ports are present around the lower rim of the disc in some instances. Most disc-shaped craft are equipped with lights on the top and bottom, and also around the rim. These lights are not visible when the craft is at rest or not functioning. There are generally no visible antenna or projections. Landing gear consists of 3 extendable legs, ending in circular landing pads. When fully extended, this landing gear supports the main body 2 to 3 feet above the surface at the lowest point. A rectangular hatch is located along the equator or on the lower surface of the disc. So we're talking about standard flying saucer sci-fi type discs here. Interesting that they said there's no protrusions or antennas. The UFO that Bob worked on, I think, was specifically said to have, I think, a 3 or 4 foot antenna above it. B, fuselage or cigar-shaped. We hear about these a lot from pilots, by the way, these specific ones. Documented reports of this type of craft are extremely rare. Air Force radar reports indicate they're approximately 2,000 feet long and 95 feet thick. What? 2,000 feet? That's massive. My God. Let's calculate this in American metrics. How many fridges wide is 2,000 feet?
If we assume a standard fridge is about 3 feet wide, then 2,000 feet would be roughly 677 fridges lined up side by side.
677 fridges long, folks. That is incredible. That is incredible. And apparently they do not operate in the lower atmosphere. Okay. Very little information is available on the performance of these craft, but radar reports have indicated speeds in excess of 7,000 miles an hour. They do not appear to engage in the violent and erratic maneuvers associated with the smaller types. Violent? What? I assume they're only being violent because we're attacking them first. I don't know. C, ovoid or circular shape. Orbs, if you will. This type of craft is described as being shaped like an ice cream cone, being rounded at the large end and tapered to a near point on the other end. Okay, wait, so this is like a teardrop shape. This is what actually John Ramirez on the latest podcast kind of described too. Very interesting. Egg-shaped, if you will. They're approximately 30 to 40 feet long, and the thick end diameter is approximately 20% of the length. There is an extremely bright light at the pointed end, and this craft usually travels point down. They can appear to be any shape from round to cylindrical, depending upon the angle of observation. Often sightings of this type of craft are elliptical craft, seen at an inclined angle or edge on. So that is interesting too, that the angle of which you're looking at this egg-shaped craft might change your, analysis of what that craft might be. And that, I think, is fair to say, from Commander Fravor to Chris Bledsoe to all these other cases, we hear about either a tic-tac, oval, cigar, round. Maybe that's just the angle at which we're seeing it. Especially if there are no seams, looking at it from a certain angle and plus the bright light might give off that effect. Very interesting. And finally, D, airfoil or triangular shaped. Whoa, this is 1954, folks. We're not talking, I don't think we're talking about TR-3A or TR-3B, but maybe. 1954 is an interesting time to be talking about triangular shaped craft. This craft is believed to be new technology due to the rarity and recency of observations. Radar indicates an isosceles triangle profile, the longest side being nearly 300 feet in length. Little is known about the performance of these craft due to the rarity of good sightings. They are believed to be capable of high speeds and abrupt maneuvers similar to or exceeding the performance attributed to the types of A and C. Whoa. Interesting that they say this is a new type of craft. So new to them, or perhaps it's their own craft and they're kind of inserting it into here to, help the propagation of some type of blue beam project. Who knows? 10. Description of extraterrestrial biological entities. Here we go, folks. We're talking about aliens. Examinations of remains recovered from wreckage of UFOBs indicate that EBEs may be classified into 2 distinct categories as follows. EBE Type 1. These entities are humanoid and might be mistaken for human beings of the Oriental race if seen from a distance. They are bipedal, 5 to 5 foot 4 inches in height, and weigh 80 to 100 pounds. They're just little fellas. They're just little fellas, really. Proportionally, they are similar to humans, although the cranium is somewhat larger and more rounded. The skin is a pale, chalky yellow in color, thick and slightly pebbled in appearance. Slightly pebbled. The eyes are small, wide-set, almond-shaped, with brownish-black irises, with very large pupils. The whites of the eyes are not like that of humans, but have a pale gray cast. The ears are small and set low on the skull. The nose is thin and long, and the mouth is wider than in humans and nearly lipless. There is no apparent facial hair and very little body hair, that being very fine and confined to the underarm and groin area. The body is thin and without apparent body fat, but the muscles are well developed. Well, they're slightly jacked. The hands are small with 4 long digits, but no opposable thumb. The outside digit is jointed in a manner as to be nearly opposable, and there is no webbing between the fingers as in humans. The legs are slightly but noticeably bowed, and the feet are somewhat splayed and proportionally large. That is one of the strangest descriptions. EBE type 2. And by the way, type 1 seems to be the EBEs that were discovered at Aztec. If you look at William Steinman's book, UFO Crash at Aztec, it talks about 16 bodies, I believe, that were found within this 100-foot craft. The craft was intact. The bodies were referred to as small children, which is also what Bob Lazar referred to them as at S4. They called them the kids because they didn't look like the typical grays. They looked like small humanoid, but have like larger heads and were smaller, but had like tiny facial features, like human-like. And in Aztec, it was even said that they had perfect teeth. EBE type 2. These entities are humanoid, but differ from type 1 in many respects. They are bipedal, 3 feet 5 inches to 4 foot 2 inches in height, and weigh about 25 to 50 pounds. Oh, you could just throw them. Proportionally, the head is much larger than humans, or type 1 EBEs, the cranium being much larger and elongated. The eyes are very large, slanted, and nearly wrap around the side of the skull. They are black with no whites showing. There is no noticeable brow ridge, and the skull has a slight peak that runs over the crown. The nose consists of 2 small slits, which sit high above the mouth, the slit-like mouth. There are no external ears. The skin is a pale bluish-gray color, being somewhat darker on the back of the creature, and is very smooth and fine-celled. There is no hair on either the face or the body, and these creatures do not appear to be mammalian. The arms are long in proportion to the legs, and the hands have 3 long, tapering fingers, and a thumb which is nearly as long as the fingers. The second finger is thicker than the others, but not as long as the index finger. The feet are small and narrow, and the 4 toes are jointed together with a membrane. It is not definitely known where either type of creature originated, but it seems certain that they did not evolve on Earth. It is further evident, although not certain, that they may have originated on 2 different planets. So it seems like type 1 definitely is more of a humanoid type alien that couldn't necessarily pass for a real human, but maybe a closer cousin to Homo sapiens. And type 2 seems to be your typical sort of skinny bob. 50 pounds. Also tridactyl. I thought 4 fingers. No, they say 3. Very interesting. Tridactyl gray beings. Are these the same beings that are present in Peru? Time will tell. All right, moving on. The description of the ET technology. This is super interesting. Now we're talking about, what are we talking about here? Probes, wands. The following information is from preliminary analysis reports of wreckage collected from crash sites of extraterrestrial craft, 1947 to 1953. Pause. 1953, we're talking about the Kingman, Arizona crash. That might be the reference here. Excerpts from which are quoted verbatim to provide guidance as to the type of characteristics of material that might be encountered in future recovery operations. A. Initial analysis of the debris from the crash site seems to indicate that the debris is that of extraterrestrial craft, which exploded from within and came into contact with the ground with great force, completely destroying the craft. The volume of the matter indicates that the craft was approximately the size of a medium aircraft, although the weight of the debris indicates that the craft was extremely light for its size. B. Metallurgical analysis of the bulk of the debris recovered indicates that the samples are not composed of any material currently known to terrestrial science. C. The material tested possesses great strength and resistance to heat in proportion to its weight and size, being stronger by far than any materials used in military or civilian aircraft at present. That's an interesting point because the 4chan whistleblower also said that these things were extremely heat resistant, which made it nearly impossible to work with. D. Much of the material having the appearance of aluminum foil or aluminum magnesium sheeting displays none of the characteristics of either metal, resembling instead some kind of unknown plastic-like material. E. Solid structures and substantial beams having a distinct similarity in appearance to very dense grain-free wood. Was very light in weight and possesses tensile and compression strength not obtainable by any means known to modern industry. Whoa. F. None of the material tested displayed measurable magnetic characteristics or residual radiation. No radiation, not magnetic. G. Several samples were engraved or embossed with marks and patterns. These patterns were not readily identifiable, and attempts to decipher their meaning has been largely unsuccessful. H. Examination of several apparent mechanical devices, gears, etc. revealed little or nothing of their function or methods of manufacture. This is really interesting stuff. The grain-free wood is a really interesting way to describe something. You know, if you were to think grain-free wood or some type of plastic, even Bob Lazar said that the craft that he worked on, he wasn't convinced was metallic. It felt cold to the touch, but that doesn't mean it was metal. You know, maybe some type of stone or lightweight granite or something. All these descriptions of these materials seem a little foreign, and we hear about the material that you bend and it goes back to what it originally was. You know, back then we also didn't have carbon fiber. You know, we didn't have any of this advanced sort of metallic alloys that we have today. So maybe today, with a keener eye and more sufficiently advanced tech, we'd be able to properly, determine what this stuff is, or at least the contractors, Raytheon and Lockheed and all of the above, probably already know this. Next up, we got the press blackout, number 12. This is chapter 3 in recovery operations. So what they go through when they recover one of these crashed UFOBs. Great care must be taken to preserve the security of any location where extraterrestrial technology might be retrievable for scientific study. Extreme measures must be taken to protect and preserve any material or craft from discovery, examination, or removal by civilian agencies or individuals of the general public. It is therefore recommended that a total press blackout be initiated whenever possible. If this course of action should not prove feasible, the following cover stories are suggested for release to the press. The officer in charge will act quickly to select the cover story that best fits the situation. It should be remembered when selecting a cover story that official policy regarding UFOBs is that they do not exist. A. Official denial. Whoa, this is really interesting. I'm having a flashback to a discussion I had with Lou Elizondo on the podcast when we had Lou back in January. Lou said something really interesting there. He said,
there's a saying we have, first of all, you deny everything, you admit nothing, and then you make counter accusations.
Well, interesting. A. Official denial. The most desirable response would be that nothing unusual has occurred. By stating that the government has no knowledge of the event, further investigation by the public press may be forestalled. B. Discredit witnesses. If at all possible, witnesses will be held incommunicado until the extent of their knowledge and involvement can be determined. Witnesses will be discouraged from talking about what they have seen, and intimidation may be necessary to ensure their cooperation. If witnesses have already contacted the press, it will be necessary to discredit their stories. This can best be done by the assertion that they have either misinterpreted natural events, are the victims of hysteria or hallucinations, or are the perpetrators of hoaxes. All of the above we've heard of, by the way, especially the hoax part when you look into things like not only the Gulf Breeze situation in Florida, but Aztec. Probably the most monumental and well-covered crash retrieval incident in the history of the United States was dismissed as a hoax immediately before the press got a hold of it by the FBI. And when looking into it, you realize there's a lot more to it. I'm leaving you guys breadcrumbs, by the way. C. Deceptive statements. It may become necessary to issue false statements to preserve the security of the site. Meteors, downed satellites, weather balloons, and military aircraft are all acceptable alternatives, although, in the case of the downed military aircraft statement, care should be exercised not to suggest that the aircraft might be experimental or secret, as this might arouse more curiosity of both the American and foreign press. Statements issued concerning contamination of the area due to toxic spills from trucks or railroad tankers can also serve to keep unauthorized or undesirable personnel away from the area. Sneaky. Super sneaky. 13. Secure the area. The area must be secured as rapidly as possible to keep authorized personnel from infiltrating the site. The officer in charge will set up a perimeter and establish a command post inside the perimeter. Personnel allowed on the site will be kept to the absolute minimum necessary to prepare the craft or debris for transport and will consist of military security forces. Local authorities may be pressed into service on traffic and crowd control. Under no circumstances will local official or law enforcement personnel be allowed inside the perimeter, and all necessary precautions should be taken to ensure that they do not interfere with the operation. Now that's interesting because also, I go back to the Aztec crash because it's something that I'm looking into right now, but local law enforcement apparently was at the site. This is 1948, 8 months after Roswell. Things were still a little dicey on the recovery side, I'm guessing. And so, they doubled down on their security tactics, apparently. So a perimeter. It is desirable that sufficient military personnel be utilized to set up a perimeter around the site large enough to keep both unauthorized personnel and the perimeter personnel from seeing the site. We've had incidences in 1947, according to Philip Corso. Apparently, the perimeters weren't well established, and people were just onlookers were kind of seeing this thing happen in real time. Once the site is contained, regular patrols will be set up along the perimeter to ensure complete security, and electronic surveillance will be utilized to augment the patrols. Perimeter personnel will be equipped with hand communication and automatic weapons with live ammunition. Personnel working at the site will carry sidearms. No unauthorized personnel will be allowed into the secure area. B. Command post. Ideally, the command post should be as close to the site as is practical to efficiently coordinate operations. As soon as the command post is operational, contact with the MJ-12 group will be established via secure communications. C. Area sweep. The site and surrounding area will be cleared of all unauthorized personnel. Witnesses will be debriefed and detained for further evaluation by MJ-12. Under no circumstances will witnesses be released from custody until their stories have been evaluated by MJ-12 and they have been thoroughly debriefed. D. Situation evaluation. A preliminary evaluation of the situation will be completed and a preliminary report prepared. The MJ-12 group will then be briefed on the situation at the earliest possible opportunity. The MJ-12 group will then make a determination as to whether or not a MJ-12 Red Team or OPNAC team will be dispatched to the area. What is an OPNAC team?
An OPNAC team refers to a group within the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations, OPNAV, that focuses on specific naval operations core functions. The N denotes a particular area of responsibility, such as operations, intelligence, or logistics. The C signifies a specific command or division within that area. These teams are integral to the Navy's organizational structure, ensuring effective management and coordination of various naval operations.
Well, looks like ChatGPT steered me wrong a little bit here. OPNAC is actually rumored to possibly be an acronym said to stand for Operations National Advisory Committee, or variations like Operational National Command. It's not an officially recognized organization, and so in UFO lore, it's sometimes described as like a high-level military or intelligence unit involved in crash retrievals, extraterrestrial contact, or special access programs, or SAPs. So if I make reference mistakenly to naval intelligence, well, forgive me. But that doesn't mean the Navy isn't involved. Once again, folks, the Navy inserts itself into the crash retrieval narrative quite deeply. As mentioned again by John Ramirez, former CIA officer, he says the highest, most top secret program, which he was refused to be read into, had to do with underwater recovery. Let's go into Section 2, the technology recovery, removal and transport. And this includes entities as well. As soon as a communication is established, removal and transport of all material will commence under order from MJ-12. A. Documentation. If the situation permits, care should be taken to document the area with photographs before anything is moved. The area will be checked for radiation and other toxic agents. If the area cannot be kept secure for an extended period of time, all material must be packed and transported as quickly as possible to the nearest secure military facility. This will be accomplished by covered transport using little-traveled roads wherever possible. B. Complete or functional craft. Craft are to be approached with extreme caution if they appear functional, as serious injury may result from exposure to radiation and electrical discharges. If the craft is functioning, but appears to be abandoned, it may be approached only by specially trained MJ-12 Red Team personnel wearing protective clothing. Any device that seems to be functioning should also be left to MJ-12 Red Team disposal. Complete craft and parts of craft too large to be transported by covered transport will be disassembled, if this can be accomplished easily and quickly. If they must be transported whole or on open flatbed trailers, they will be covered in such a manner as to camouflage their shape. Whoa. So they're actively camouflaging their shape during transport. That's interesting. Because obviously seeing a saucer on a flatbed, kind of gives it away. Wow. Maybe now is a good time to remind you that our Majestic 12 MJ-12 merch line is now available. Collection comes complete with hats, patches, pins, sweaters, t-shirts, journals, pencils, so many different things. We worked so hard on this collection. We've been actually working on this for the past, I think, like 6 or 8 months. Very, very proud of it. Get it while you can. Get it while it's hot. Available at area52.shop. We carry on. C, now we go on to extraterrestrial and biological entities. EBEs must be removed to a top-secret facility as quickly as possible. Great care should be taken to prevent possible contamination by alien biological agents. Dead EBEs should be packed in ice at the earliest opportunity to preserve tissues. Should live EBEs be encountered, they should be taken into custody and removed to a top-secret facility by ambulance. Every effort should be taken to ensure the EBE's survival. Personnel involvement with EBEs alive or dead must be kept to an absolute minimum. See Chapter 5 for more detailed information dealing with EBEs. We'll get to Chapter 5 in a second. That is crazy. Imagine you're an ambulance driver. If there's an ambulance driver out there who remembers driving around the EBE, please reach out to us. Cleansing the area. Once all material has been removed from the central area, the immediate area will be thoroughly inspected to make sure that all traces of extraterrestrial technology have been removed. In the case of a crash, the surrounding area will be thoroughly gone over several times to ensure that nothing has been overlooked. The search area involved may vary according to local conditions, at the discretion of the officer in charge. When the officer in charge is satisfied that no further evidence of the event remains at the site, it may be evacuated. Also, something in Diana Pasulka's book, which was interesting, they talked about her being brought to this crash site in New Mexico by who we now know as Tim Taylor, this person, that worked somehow in the government. But at this very crash site, there seemed to be a ton of just like debris, aluminum debris from like tin cans and stuff. And it was explained to her that that's actually how they cover up a lot of this stuff. So instead of finding all the little parts, it's much easier to cover it up with a bunch of junk, and then people metal detecting just, you're never going to find anything. So 16, special or unusual conditions. The possibility exists that extraterrestrial craft may land or crash in heavily populated areas where security cannot be maintained, or where large segments of the population and the public press may witness these events. Contingency Plan MJ-1949-04P/78, top secret eyes only, should be held in readiness should the need to make a public disclosure become necessary. Now that was referenced in the original briefing documents that we read through, if you want to check that out. Okay, here, this is interesting because these are basically items, the description and condition of the items, the code, and then the receiving facility. Now, if we look at aircraft, intact or operational, S4. Intact devices, like electronic devices or machines, S4. Damaged device, S4. Power plant, so devices and machines and fragments which are possible propulsion units, fuels and etc., S4. Identified and unidentified fragments, S4. However, non-mechanical, non-electronic materials of a support nature such as clothing, personal belongings, or organic ingestibles went to the Blue Lab WP61. What is that? They're saying here that Blue Lab, blue means like the being. Like a blue lab is also slang for like the lab handling blue or the non-human intelligence. So the living non-humans would go to the Department of Naval Intelligence at some level, and then the deceased ones would go to Blue Lab. My guess would be Battelle. That's where the EBO scientist said that's where he had worked, or where the bodies were being kept, the dead ones. And then the living ones would be operations of naval intelligence at some point. And then media would go to Building 2 at KB88, and then any device, any weapon would go to S4 as well. So S4 being the major facility there. Here they just show basically packing slips for if you're shipping this stuff and what that should look like. The box closure is sealed with a gummed craft tape. Here's the craft tape that they were referring to initially. MJ Form 1-007 is placed in a sealed manila envelope marked Magic 12 access only. It then shows here a diagram. There's a picture here of the original picture of the diagram of like what the boxes will look like, how to handle those, how to take them out. All very serious stuff. Pretty standard, I guess, when dealing with sensitive materials. Here we go. Section 1, Living Organisms. The EBEs, baby. Scope. This section deals with the encounters with living extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBEs. Such encounters fall under the jurisdiction of MJ-12 OPNAC BBS-01 and will be dealt with by this special unit only. This section details the responsibilities of persons or units making the initial contact. Whoa. This is something I got to learn if we're having one of these little gray fellas on this podcast one day. Encounters. Encounters with EBEs may be classified according to one of the following categories. Encounters A, encounters initiated by EBEs. Possible contact may take place as a result of overtures by the entities themselves. In these instances, it is anticipated that encounters will take place at military installations or other obscure locations selected by mutual agreement. Such meetings would have the advantage of being limited to personnel with appropriate clearance away from public scrutiny. Although it is not considered very probable, there also exists the possibility that EBEs may land in public places without prior notice. In this case, OPNAC team will formulate cover stories for the press and prepare briefings for the president and chiefs of staff. So here they're just basically telling us that they're already communicating with these EBEs and that they already have a deal with them, which corroborates what was said by Dan Burish or Dan Crane about the initial contacts with the J-Rod. That there was some type of deal or exchange program happening. And it also corroborates this idea that in I think it was 54, maybe 56, this idea of the Greada Treaty made by Eisenhower where he met with the aliens, but then also the meeting in, I think, 1965 at the Holloman Air Force Field, the landing there, another meeting occurred with taller entities. I don't know. Very interesting. B, encounters as a result of downed craft. Contact with survivors of accidents or craft downed by natural events or military action may occur with little or no warning. In these cases, it is important that the initial contact be limited to personnel to preserve security. Civilian witnesses to the area will be detained and debriefed by MJ-12. Contact with EBEs by military personnel not having MJ-12 or OPNAC clearances is to be strictly limited to action necessary to ensure the availability of the EBEs for study by the OPNAC team. Now, remember, OPNAC is the ones that deal with them when they're alive. 24, isolation and custody. Okay, little custody battle for these little guys. EBE will be detained by whatever means are necessary and removed to a secure location as soon as possible. Precautions will be taken by personnel coming in contact with EBEs to minimize the risk of disease as a result of contamination by unknown organisms. If the entities are wearing spacesuits or breathing apparatus of some kind, care should be exercised to prevent damage to these devices. While all efforts should be taken to assure the well-being of the EBEs, they must be isolated from any contact with unauthorized personnel. While it is not clear what provisions or amenities might be required by non-human entities, they should be provided if possible. The officer in charge of the operation will make these determinations as no guidelines now exist to cover this area. And I'm sure they've since come up with a lot of these guidelines, following the 1996 crash and visitation of these tiny little aliens in this town of Varginha, Brazil, where people who came in contact, namely one person who came in contact with one of these beings, ended up dying from what was written on his autopsy, general infection, due to contact. So as much as I'd love to have one of these little guys on the podcast, I'll be wearing a spacesuit for sure. Or it will. One of us will. Both of us might. Severe precautions will be taken in order to assure both of our survival. B, injured or wounded entities will be treated by a medical personnel assigned to the OPNAC team. If the team medical personnel are not immediately available, first aid will be administered by medical corps personnel at the initial site. Since little is known about EBE's biological functions, aid will be confined to the stopping of bleeding, bandaging of wounds, and splinting of broken limbs. No medications of any kind are to be administered, as the effect of terrestrial medications on non-human biological systems are impossible to predict. As soon as the injuries are considered stabilized, the EBEs will be moved by closed ambulance or other suitable conveyance to a secure location. C, in dealing with any living extraterrestrial biological entity, security is of paramount importance. All other considerations are secondary. Although it is preferable to maintain the physical well-being of any entity, the loss of EBE life is considered acceptable if conditions or delays to preserve that life in any ways compromises the security of operations. Basically saying, making sure everything is under wraps is more important than the lives of these EBEs. That's how important this program is to these folks. By some sheer miracle, this beautiful little life that comes from another star system and another species entirely makes its way here to communicate with us. It is more important for us that no one finds out about it than that the life of this EBE continues to exist. Sad times indeed. I would not like to be the one making that call. D. Once the OPNAC team has taken custody of the EBEs, their care and transportation to designated facilities become the responsibility of OPNAC personnel. Every cooperation will be extended to the team in carrying out duties. OPNAC team personnel will be given top priority at all times, regardless of their apparent rank or status. No person has the authority to interfere with the OPNAC team in the performance of its duties by special direction of the President of the United States. Whoa. So even the lowest level OPNAC security personnel supersedes absolutely any government entity in existence. Now we're going to go into non-living organisms, all right? So the scope, ideally retrieval for scientific study of cadavers and other biological remains, will be carried out by medical personnel familiar with this type of procedure. Familiar? Huh. Probably talking about either Vannevar Bush or Dr. Bronk, is it? These are the guys that apparently, were dealing with the deceased EBEs or EBEs. Because of security considerations, such collections may need to be done by non-medical personnel. The section will provide guidance for retrieval, preservation, and removal of cadavers and remains in the field. Ooh, dark. Retrieval and preservation. A. The degree of decomposition of organic remains will vary depending on the length of time the remains have been lying in the open, unprotected, and may be accelerated by both local weather conditions and action by predators. Gross. Therefore, biological specimens will be removed from the crash site as quickly as possible to preserve the remains in as good a condition as possible. A photographic record will be made of all remains before they are removed from the site. Again, the gross sort of thought comes to mind of like some coyote just like having dinner in the desert unexpectedly, being like, ooh, a snack. B, personnel involved with this type of operation will take all reasonable precautions to minimize physical contact with the cadavers or remains being retrieved. Surgical gloves should be worn, or if they are not available, wool or leather gloves may be worn, provided they are collected for decontamination immediately after use. Shovels and entrenching tools may be employed to handle remains, provided caution is exercised to be certain no damage is done to the remains. Remains will be touched with bare hands only if no other means of moving them can be found. All personnel and equipment involved in recovery operations will undergo decontamination procedures immediately after those operations have been completed. Wonder if they talk about the smell as well. Remains will be preserved against further decomposition as equipment and conditions permit. Cadavers and remains will be bagged or securely wrapped in waterproof coverings. Tarpaulins or foul weather gear may be used for this purpose if necessary. Remains will be refrigerated or packed with ice if available. All remains will be tagged or labeled and the time and date recorded. Wrapped remains will be placed on stretchers or in sealed containers for immediate removal to a secure facility. Small detached pieces and material scraped from solid surfaces will be put in jars and other small capped containers if available. Containers will be clearly marked as to their contents and the time and date recorded. Containers will be refrigerated or packed with ice as soon as possible and removed to a secure facility. So we know that there are photos then, right? That's what they keep saying with the down craft, with the EBEs. Photographs are suggested to be taken, right? So Danny Sheehan had mentioned in one of our podcasts that he was made aware of a photo at Project Blue Book that looked like this, that was taken when the crashed UFO was like in a hill, and there were people photographing it. There was like people holding like those real cameras and filming it. So that checks out to what Danny Sheehan was saying about it, which is pretty cool. Bit of a piece of anecdotal corroborative evidence, if you will, but hey, it's what we got to work with, you know? Here we got an image of different crafts, which is really interesting. Interesting that some of them do show seams, though, when they said no seams. Chapter 6, Guide to UFO Identification. The UFOB Guide, Follow-Up Investigations. A UFOB report is worthy of follow-up investigation when it contains information to suggest that positive identification with a well-known phenomenon may be made, or when it characterizes an unusual phenomenon. The report suggests almost immediately, largely by the coherency and clarity of the data, that there is something of identification and/or scientific value. In general, reports which should be given consideration are those that involve several reliable observers, together or separately, and which concern sightings of greater duration than 1/4 minute. Exceptions should be made to this when circumstances attending the report are considered to be extraordinary. Special attention should be given to reports which give promise to a fix on the position, and those reports involving unusual trajectories. You know, it is interesting that, like, even if you are skeptically inclined, you have to imagine that the Air Force or whoever is receiving phone calls from because rest assured, people do receive phone calls. You know, whether or not the events are happening, people are calling and saying that there are events happening, whether it's misidentification or whatever it is, right? So these people call in. Well, there has to be some type of structure for screening these calls, and they would be foolish based on multiple, data points of eyewitnesses to dismiss anything, right? So there has to be, so this would make sense that they have some type of protocol. If you're out there doubting any of this is real, you would be hard pressed to think that they don't have some type of protocol for screening, possible foreign adversarial aerial phenomenon. They need to know. So, yeah. So the duration of the sighting, less than 15 seconds. That is really interesting. Okay. Each UFO case should be judged individually, but there are a number of rules of thumb under each of the following headings, which should prove helpful in determining the necessity for following up an investigation. Okay. So if you're out there, folks, and you're wanting to, call the Air Force or MJ-12 or whatever it may be with your concerns about a sighting, make sure you take these rules of thumb into consideration. A, the duration of sighting. So the duration of sighting, when it's less than 15 seconds, the probabilities are great that it is not worthy of a follow-up. As a word of caution, however, should a large number of individual observers concur on an unusual sighting of a few second durations, it should not be dismissed. B, the number of persons reporting the sighting. Short duration sightings by single individuals are seldom worthy of follow-up. 2 or 3 competent independent observations carry the weight of 10 or more simultaneous individual observations. As an example, 25 people at one spot may observe a strange light in the sky. This, however, has less weight than 2 reliable people observing the same light from different locations. In the latter case, a position fix is indicated. Ooh, interesting. C, distance from location of sightings to nearest field unit. Reports which meet the preliminary criterion stated above should all be investigated if their occurrence is in the immediate operating vicinity of the squadron concerned. For reports involving greater distances, follow-up necessity might be judged as being inversely proportional to the square of the distances concerned. For example, an occurrence of 150 miles away might be considered to have 4 times the importance, other things being equal, than one that is 300 miles away. That's also interesting. So things that are in direct vicinity of military, let's say, hold a higher importance just because of location. D, reliability of person or persons reporting. In establishing the necessity of follow-up investigation, only short-term reliability of individuals can be employed. Short-term reliability is judged from the logic and coherency of the original report by the age and occupation of the person. Particular attention should be given to whether the occupation involves observation, reporting, or technical knowledge. Right, so a young, vital pilot might be someone they pay more attention to or give more importance to than an old YouTuber like myself, let's say. E, number of individual sightings reported. 2 completely individual sightings, especially when separated by a mile or more, constitutes sufficient cause for follow-up, assuming previous criterion have not been violated. F, the value of obtaining additional information immediately. If the information cannot be obtained within 7 days, the value of such information is greatly decreased. It is of great value to obtain additional information immediately if previously stated criteria have been met. Often, if gathered quickly, weather conditions, angular speed, changes in direction, duration, are sufficient for immediate evaluation. If investigation is undertaken after weeks or months, the original observers cease to be of value as far as additional new information is concerned. Fair. Generally, late interrogation yields only bare repetition of facts originally reported, plus an inability on the part of the observer to be objective. I agree with that. I think the further, just like a magic trick, and I talk about this on several podcasts that I've been on, but when describing seeing or observing anomalous phenomena, it is akin to someone describing what a magic trick was, in that your perspective is a little bit skewed because of, the impossibility, the nature of the impossibility of the occurrence. But also, immediately after an event takes place, a few things happen to you psychologically, which inhibit, proper reporting. And one of those being, you don't want to seem foolish. So you will make the conditions a little bit more impossible. And 2, a lot of times you want to make the person feel as though they were there when explaining to them. So you're not trying to give them data, you're trying to convey an emotion. And when you do that, you pad on things a little bit. You'll round off the edges and erode the information a little bit so that it appears more digestible and more awe-inspiring or wondrous. So that will happen. So I understand that. Existence of physical evidence, photographs, material, hardware. In cases where any physical evidence exists, follow-up should be made, even if some of the above criterion have not been met. Right. So if you're reporting a sighting, if you say, hey, I have a piece of something, rest assured you're going to get a knock on the door. And conclusion. It is understood that all the above criteria must be evaluated in terms of common sense. The original report, from its working and clarity, will almost always suggest to the reader whether there is any pay dirt in the report. Identification criteria. When a UFO report meets in large measure the criteria projected in Section 1 and a follow-up investigation is instituted, then the interrogator should ask what physical object or objects might have served as the original stimulus for the report. The word object here includes optical phenomena such as reflections from clouds, sundogs, etc. Frequently, one or perhaps 2 solutions will be immediately suggested by the nature of the report. The word solution cannot be used here in the scientific sense. A solution in UFOB work means that a hypothesis has been arrived at which appears to have the greatest probability of having given rise to the given report. Following is a group of hypotheses or examples which should prove helpful in arriving at solutions. A check should be made to see how many of the items are satisfied by the report and how many are missing. An effort should be made to obtain any missing items as soon as possible. Each typical hypothesis is listed in a separate paragraph. So a lot of these things are going to be reported, right? I remember, I think it was November or December, a lot of people had posted videos of the planet, I think it was Venus. And Venus in the wintertime before the sun sets is completely visible in the sky and brighter than any other star. And it just kind of sits there. And so a lot of UFO reports tend to increase during that time. Not to say that UFOs don't exist. We're just saying that people will report prosaic events as well as, UFOBs. So something they have to be aware of. So they talk about aircrafts, balloons, meteors, stars or planets, and optical phenomena, including lights and sundogs and whatnot. So I'm not going to go through all of that. That seems like a department for Dr. Menzel to take care of. But yeah, essentially just looking at natural phenomenon and things that, you would assume are up there. Another one of which that won't be included in there now today, which makes things, exponentially more complicated, satellites and drones and experimental aircraft as well. But yeah, that's something that we have to be on the look for as well. So folks, that's about it for the read through here. In my opinion, a very thorough manual of operations. Everything from what to do with the reported sightings, what to do at the crash, how do you lock down things, how do you create a media blackout, how do you interrogate and debrief people, where do you send the wreckage, the bodies, the tech, the live beings, who to contact, how to package it, crate it, ship it nationally, internationally, and just basically how to cover it up, how to keep it secret. MJ-12, to this day, continues to be a part of the UFO zeitgeist and lore. It includes everyone from Bob Lazar to Dan Burrish or Crane to Richard Doty to all sorts of other people involved, and the campaigns of disinformation run rampant within this area. So definitely proceed with caution when consuming this content, but keep an open mind as well. I personally, my conviction, very, very high that MJ-12, or at least the Majestic program, exists. And most of that comes from, confirmation from Bob Lazar, who I hold, I think, in highest conviction of all people who have stepped forward. Crucify me for that if you like. But I've spoken to Bob, on several occasions, and it is clear to me, at least, that he was involved in one of these projects and that the MAJ stuff is real. So that is my personal conviction level on the matter. And I don't say that lightly, I'll tell you that. Folks, let me know what you think of the Majestic 12 group. If you haven't already checked out the previous video I made on these gatekeepers of aliens, go check it out. I'll leave the link in the description. Yeah, I worked hard on that video too. And by all means, if you want to check out area52.shop and shop your very own piece of MJ-12 merch, by all means do so. It is there. We will not be reprinting anything. This is like as soon as it's out there, it's gone, and we're going to move on. But this collection, we stock the shelves quite a bit, so have at it. Join the Discord, check out the extra episodes on the membership. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next video. Next week, we got a cool guest coming into the skiff, a Hollywood director. Stay tuned for that. Peace and love.